So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about key concept 5.2. And the key concept 5.2 talks about the causes of the Civil War. And I'm not going to read through this, but I just want you to know that in AP, they always have key concept 1, key concept 2, and so on. This is concept 5.2. And so before we start, I want to do a brain dump. And basically, a brain dump is just anything that you know. What were the causes of the American Civil War? So the American Civil War was 1861 to 1865. 600,000 Americans died, and it's the bloodiest conflict in American history. The most amount of people. What were the causes? So go ahead and write it in the chat. What were the causes? What were the causes of this war? Anything that you know. Okay, slavery. Debates over the practice of slavery. Secession. All right, keep going, guys. If you have more, women's rights, kinda, slavery. What else was happening there? The Union. What was happening to the West? Popular sovereignty, Arthy, good. Expansion. All right, expansion. And basically, the Civil War, and I've heard it like the best expression I've ever heard is, what was the cause of the Civil War? It wasn't slavery. It was the expansion of slavery. And so a lot of people always ask, when I talk to them or you ask about the Civil War, they said the cause was slavery. You're right, but you're half right, because slavery had existed for many years up until the American Civil War. It had existed for about 80 years in American history. I'm sorry, longer than that, since the forming of the United States Constitution, about 80 years. But that didn't cause a civil war. So what caused it was the expansion, was when people began moving westward and they began taking their slaves. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the attempts to stop the spread of slavery. Now, real quick, I have a question for you guys. When somebody's diagnosed with cancer, they have a cancer. How do you stop cancer? How do you beat cancer? Chemotherapy. What does chemotherapy do? Hey, Brian, welcome. Bone transplant. I don't know if you. Oh, you know what? I haven't heard that, but maybe a bone transplant might work. What is the goal of chemotherapy? Sorry, guys. Let me see. It tries to rid the body of cancerous cells. It's a drug that kills the cells. All right. Essentially, chemotherapy tries to stop the spread of slavery cancer. Because cancer kills you. Just because you have cancer in your body doesn't mean you're going to automatically die. What kills you is the spread of cancer. And so when you go to the doctor, or somebody goes to the doctor and they say you have cancer, the first question that they ask is, has it spread? And if it's spread, then it might be over. If it hasn't spread, then you can attack it. Well, why am I bringing that up? Because Abraham Lincoln described slavery is like a cancer. And so why would he use this phrase, slavery is like a cancer? Why didn't he just describe it and do all these things? Why would he say that? What is he trying to say there? Okay, Zara, that it's harder to stop slavery once it's grown. Okay, perfect. And that slavery, how is slavery going to kill the nation? Through division? By taking it over? Jocelyn, if it's going to spread. So all you guys are right, but Lincoln's analogy here is he calls it a cancer because he says, look, cancer kills you by spreading. Slavery is going to destroy the nation by spreading. The existence of cancer doesn't kill you. The existence of slavery didn't cause the Civil War, but the expansion of it did. Okay, I want to emphasize that point. Okay, that's a very important point. Okay, so one of the things that I want you to write down, and I'm going to keep going on with this analogy about cancer because I really like what Lincoln does here. So imagine you go to the doctor and the doctor finds out that you have cancer. The first thing they're going to do is give you a treatment. And so when the United States had this issue of slavery, which was like a cancer, they tried to solve the problem. And the first way they tried to solve it, and I would write this down, is through the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Now, as the United States is growing and this huge piece of land that we acquired, who did we acquire this piece of land from? Right here, this huge piece of land, the Louisiana Purchase. All right. Nevada, France, correct. The French, correct. And we bought this huge piece of land. And the question is, okay, what's going to happen to this territory? Are we going to allow slaves? So in 1820, amid growing sectional tensions over the issue of slavery, the U.S. passed a law that admitted Missouri, here's Missouri, as a free state, as a slave state, and it admitted Maine as a free state. So Missouri a slave state, Maine as a free state, while banning slavery in the remaining parts of the Louisiana Purchase of the 3630 parallel. So here's what it does, the Missouri Compromise. First, it says, Missouri, you're going to enter as a slave state, Maine as a free state. Why would they do that? Hey, everybody. All right, Justin, you're on it. To keep things balanced where? All right, you guys got it. Perfect. To keep things balanced in the House of Representatives or in the Congress. So remember, every state gets 2 senators. So if you have an unequal amount of slave states or free states, you have more senators, which means you have more power. So this is a way to keep it even. But this idea is that above this line, you are not going to have any more slavery. And so that was the first treatment to stop the spread of cancer. All right. And it was signed by James Monroe. Well, something happens to this state during the Missouri Compromise, and you have a representative named James Tallmadge, and he does something. He tries to introduce an amendment that would prohibit the further introduction of slaves in Missouri. That means that, yes, Missouri is a slave state, but if you can't bring any more slaves there. Then he says that if you are a slave and you're 25 years old, you should be freed in Missouri. And finally, that slavery would eventually go away in Missouri. This is called the Tallmadge Amendment. Okay, this is an important word that you could use to get some points in the AP exam when you're talking about the compromises. The Tallmadge Amendment tried to essentially sneak it in there that slavery would stop spreading. Well, it didn't pass. But I kind of think that if it had passed, maybe the Civil War could have been averted. But who knows? Then the second attempt. So the first attempt, remember, you have cancer, your doctor gives you a prescription, they give you a treatment to stop the spread of it. The United States, to stop the spread of it, did pass the Missouri Compromise. But that didn't work because the United States keeps expanding. So again, in 1850, they passed another compromise. They don't come up with the greatest names, the Compromise of 1850. And this is signed by Millard Fillmore, the 13th president. Okay? So let's look at the breakdown of the Compromise of 1850. Well, before I start though, how's everybody doing, guys? You guys with me? Am I going too fast? Thumbs up. You with me? All right, 1 thumbs up. Everybody else is asleep. All right, there we go. Awesome, guys. Thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope to make things as clear as possible. And so let's go back to this analogy about cancer. So the first attempt was the Missouri Compromise. That obviously didn't stop the spread of slavery. So they come up with another attempt, the Compromise of 1850. And they come up with a series of compromises. The first one is that California is going to be a free state. That's an advantage for the North. So remember, a compromise is when you have two people that don't agree and you kind of give and take a little bit, okay? So the North wants something and the South wants something. So the first thing is no slavery in California. The next thing is that the two territories could vote on whether to permit slavery. This Utah territory and the New Mexico territory, this is called popular sovereignty, which you guys talked about there. And, oh, sorry. Hey guys, can you guys hear me? Sorry, it just cut out for a sec. Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up. All right. All right, awesome. So the second part is, the second compromise is, part of the compromise is that they could vote here to have slavery. Now, is this going to stop the spread of slavery? Is popular sovereignty going to stop it? All right, perfect. Yeah, you're right. Because they can vote to have it or not to have it. So think about it. The cancer is still kind of spreading. Okay? The third thing is Texas gave up its western land claim in the Rio Grande River. And basically, this is a neutral advantage. Third, the slave trade, but not slavery, was abolished in the District of Columbia. Now, why would it matter that they would abolish slavery in Washington, D.C.? Why would that matter? Think about why that would matter. You have the White House, you have government. What's the last thing you want to do? Yeah, all right. Jocelyn's exactly right. You don't want to look out your window. Exactly, Zara. It's the political capital of America. You don't want to look out the window and see slaves. So they banned slavery in the capital. The advantage is for the North. And the South says, hey, what about us? We need one more advantage. So they pass the Fugitive Slave Law. What does that do, the Fugitive Slave Law? Exactly. So, exactly, guys. Perfect. So, if a slave away from the South, the Fugitive Slave Act said that they would have to be returned. And so, the second attempt to stop the spread of slavery was the Compromise of 1850. But I'm going to ask you guys a question. Does this compromise stop the spread of slavery? No. Yeah. I'm sorry to ask like yes or no questions, but you have to understand it doesn't. So it's not like you can go to the doctor and the doctor's going to say, well, we're going to stop the spread of cancer just a little bit. If you don't stop all of it, you're going to die. And so this compromise isn't going to work. And again, this is the third, sorry, I'll fix that. This is the third attempt, is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So we have this territory here. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was an 1854 bill that mandated popular sovereignty, allowing settlers of a territory to decide whether slavery would be allowed in the new states. And so basically what people could do is move to this territory and vote whether or not they wanted slavery. And what happens is you have all these people from the South move there and all these people from the North move there and they start voting. And you have a miniature civil war going on because you have people from the South and people from the North, and they start fighting in Kansas. And this is a preview of what's to come to the Civil War. They call this Bleeding Kansas. The conflicts that arose really led the way to the Civil War. Sorry, guys, that was attempt number 3. So I spoke about 3 attempts. So real quick, just to review, can you tell me the 3 attempts that aimed to stop the spread of slavery? Oh, okay. So the cause of Bleeding Kansas, before I do that question, was basically right here in Kansas, they had popular sovereignty. the people would decide whether or not to have slavery. Well, you have a lot of people from the South move here temporarily, and you have people from the North move there temporarily just to vote. And during that time, while they're there, they start to fight. And people die in Kansas over this issue. And this is where they get the name Bleeding Kansas. Okay, so what were the three things that were passed? No problem, Zara. Thank you. Great question. All right, Jocelyn, the Tallmadge Amendment was part of the Compromise of 1820, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Correct. So the Tallmadge Amendment, let's go back to here. Remember, it tried to prohibit. It didn't pass, but it just showed that people were trying to stop the spread of slavery. It didn't pass, though, but it shows that the northern attempts were to stop the spread of slavery. All right. How you guys doing? Hey, is there a delay on my audio or is it just me? All right, awesome. So I want to talk about the next thing is what happens here. So we had these three attempts to stop the spread of slavery, and none of them really worked. They exacerbated the problem. They made things worse. And then, as if politically things couldn't get worse, socially, there's a book that's out there. It's called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And Lincoln famously met the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Her name was Harriet Beecher Stowe. And he goes up to her and he says, so you are the little lady who wrote the book that made this great war. And to me, that captures the importance of this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Has anybody read Uncle Tom's Cabin? All right. No, thank you for your honesty. It is a movie. It's a movie, and there's different versions of it. I haven't seen the newest one, but I heard it was pretty good. Well, what was the big deal about this book, Uncle Tom's Cabin? Well, let's learn about the woman who wrote it, first of all. This is her name, Harriet Beecher Stowe. She's the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. She's also an abolitionist. What does it mean if she's an abolitionist? Okay, Zara, exactly. Nevada. Perfect. She's against slavery. Nevada. I'm going to get that right. And Jocelyn, thank you. So yeah, she's against slavery. And so she writes this book, obviously with a purpose. Harriet Beecher Stowe was the daughter of a famous congregationalist minister. She's deeply religious. Even in this picture, you see the little cross there. She's deeply religious. And she writes this book. And in its first year, Uncle Tom's Cabin sells 350,000 copies, which is very, very impressive. Well, Uncle Tom's Cabin is about a slave named Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom is an amazingly kind old man. Let me see if I have a picture here. I think, oh no, I didn't put it there. But Uncle Tom is like an amazingly kind old man. And he's put in this institution of slavery, and he's very religious. He's very positive. He takes care of people. He cares about his slave owner, and slavery just kind of eats Uncle Tom alive. And slavery is so one of the themes of Uncle Tom's Cabin is that slavery is not just a political contest, but it's also a moral struggle. I've read Uncle Tom. I've seen the movie. And you cry for Uncle Tom. I mean, you end up loving that guy. He kind of seems like a Christ-like figure. Like he's this man, he's this great man, and he's just put into this horrible situation. He's all right. Spoiler alert. You guys ready? Uncle Tom dies at the end of the book. He's killed by his slave master, and you feel nothing but sickness because he was not a bad man. So it also promoted the idea that slavery was an evil, and that it damaged families, white as well as black. And this book is widely read in the United States. And people in the North have a reaction saying, see, I told you slavery was evil. People in the South read it and say, look, this is just propaganda. And again, it just divides the country even more. All right. Trick question. Who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin? All right, good. You're going to see that name all the time, Harriet Beecher Stowe, okay? Awesome. So try to remember that, write it down so you can remember. All right, so let's progress. How you guys doing? We're halfway there. Actually, we're more than halfway there. All right. So things keep getting worse in the United States. And these things are happening some of them are happening at the same time. Some of them are happening before and after. John Brown is going to be a man that's going to make things worse. So let's go back to attempt number 3, which was the attempt number 3 to solve the issue of slavery. It was the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And I said that this Kansas-Nebraska territory is opened up to popular sovereignty, or as it states, let the people decide. And people from the South and people from the North move there, and you have a miniature civil war. Well, one of the people that moves there is this man named John Brown. And John Brown is an extremely religious man. Thumbs up. Have you guys heard of John Brown? Did you guys talk about him already? Thumbs down. Not yet. Okay, perfect. Great. So John Brown is going to be an extremely important character. When you're talking about events that led up to the American Civil War, John Brown is a name that you have to be able to talk about. So John Brown moves to this territory. He's one of these Northerners that moves to Kansas to essentially vote against slavery. Well, who else is there? There's going to be Southerners there. And so John Brown decides that he's going to kill some of these Southerners. And he gets a group of men. Some of his, I think in this group of men, they're maybe not this one, but in the other one, his kids, he's got his sons. They form this group and they kill these pro-slavery settlers, these people that moved to Kansas to vote for pro-slavery. And he says, I don't care. These people are pro-slavery. They deserve to die. Well, people are outraged over this, and they said, look, there's still murder, and John Brown runs away. But nevertheless, this is where Bleeding Kansas comes from. And he has this famous quote here, I have only a short time to live, only one death to die, and I will die fighting for this cause. There will be no peace in this land until slavery is done for. And so John Brown takes it upon himself to essentially end slavery or fight against those pushing slavery forward. Okay? So he's an important figure. Let's review. He goes into the territory, into this Kansas territory. He fights against other Southerners. He gets a group of people, fights against them. John Brown murders 5 pro-slavery settlers, and then he leaves again. Okay? But John Brown is going to be a hero in the North and a murderer in the South. And so he comes back. In 1859, John Brown has, yes, that is the same. Arthi, that's exactly the same man. Correct. And we're about to talk about Harpers Ferry right now. So John Brown was one of the people that led this charge in Bleeding Kansas over the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And then in 1859, he's going to be involved in Harpers Ferry. Now, Harpers Ferry is this place where they would basically hide and store weapons, guns, ammo, so on. And John Brown has an idea. He says, if I can get my hands on those weapons, I can give them to the slaves, and we can fight our way out of slavery. And it's an idea that is pretty revolutionary for that time. And he tries it. He goes with his sons. He goes with a bunch of men, and they try to storm Harpers Ferry. Well, the revolt is during the raid, 10 people are killed, including his 2 sons. John Brown is shot, and he doesn't die, but he's brought to trial. And so they capture him and say, look, why did you do this? Why did you try to give weapons to slaves? and he's found guilty of it, and he's going to be hanged for his crime. And right when he's going to walk out for his hanging, he turns around and he says one of the most prophetic things that you could say at that time. He says, look, I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away with blood. And basically he's saying, I thought that killing a few people could get rid of slavery. No, I was wrong. It's going to take a lot of blood, a lot of people dying for us to get rid of slavery. And guess what? He was right. Because 2 years after that, the American Civil War is going to start, where 600,000 Americans are going to die. All right? So that's the role of John Brown. How you guys doing so far? All right. You guys still with me? When I try to explain things, I try to explain them as simple as I can. That way, you can read more about it. But I just want to make sure that you guys get the information. All right? So let's go back. We had 3 attempts. Actually, let's do a little review. What were the 3 attempts to stop the spread of slavery? Write them down. Give me 1, 2, 3, 4. Go. Missouri Compromise. Okay. Compromise of 1850. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act. All right, what was the Tallmadge Amendment? Okay, perfect. Perfect. And it was tied to which compromise? Which compromise did it have to do with? So, Nevada, it did not have to do with popular sovereignty. That comes later. The Compromise of 1820. So the Tallmadge Amendment had to do with the Compromise of 1820. Okay. Now, let's go back. Who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin? All right. And what happened to John Brown? He was killed. He was hung for, right? And he wanted to give slaves weapons at Harpers Ferry, want to steal weapons and basically fight his way out of the South, out of slavery with other African Americans. He was not an African American. He was a white man, but he wanted to give weapons to the African Americans and help them fight their way out. Well, things are going to get worse because now we have another decision. Remember, let's go back to the spread of slavery. The only way you stop cancer is to stop it from spreading. The only way you can save the Union is to stop slavery from spreading. That was Abraham Lincoln. So in 1857, 2 years before Harper's Ferry, we have this man named Dred Scott. Thumbs up. Have you guys ever heard of Dred Scott? Very handsome man. All right, perfect, Zara. So this is going to be another important person to remember. All right. Okay. Nevada, good, perfect. So Dred Scott is a slave, and he is a slave that's living in Missouri. Okay, so let me go back to this map right here. Dred Scott is living right here in Missouri. Is Missouri a free state or a slave state? Okay, perfect. So Dred Scott is going to travel with his master from Missouri to Wisconsin. So let's travel with him right here. Is Wisconsin a free state or a slave state? Okay, so Dred Scott travels from Missouri to Wisconsin, and he's standing in Wisconsin. He says, wait, why am I a slave? I'm in a free state. I should be free. Well, that's going to complicate things. That's a big question. So Dred Scott sues his master for his freedom. This all happens under the 15th president. Oh, sorry, guys. This is the 15th president of the United States. Abraham Lincoln's number 16. Sorry, I'll fix that. This is James Buchanan. And his case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. So Dred Scott sues, and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has a very interesting opinion. First, it says, look, Dred Scott, you can't sue because you're not a citizen. And citizens cannot bring suit. Second, slaves are property. And the Fifth Amendment protects property. So you're actually the property of your slave owner, and the government can't take away your property. So the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which banned the slavery, is unconstitutional. So here's what happens. Dred Scott sues, and the Supreme Court says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's think about this in terms of property. Now, if I own my house, the government can't just come and take my house away. That's protected in the Constitution. So how can we come by and take their slaves away? And so this means now that slavery, anybody, if you're in a slave state, you can move to any of these states that are in blue, that are free states, with your slaves, and nobody can take it away. Why can't they take away your slaves there, according to this decision? Exactly. Their property. So now that means slavery could technically spread everywhere because they're property. You can take your slaves anywhere. And so think about this. This is like the like you go to the doctor and you say, okay, hey, has the cancer spread? And the doctor says it's over. That's it. This is what the Dred Scott decision shows. It shows that this issue is so complicated. People have property, slaves are property, they can take them anywhere. That means you don't really have free states. And it's like, what is going on? And that leads us there to the Lincoln-Douglas debates. All right? Yes, it was. I'm not going to get this. Cannon. Yes, correct. You're right. I'm going to call you Cannon. Sorry, because I'm going to butcher that name, and I don't want to do that. I want to respect you. So Zara, yes. And let's continue. So, time in 1858, there's a Senate race. Like, we're coming up on an election year. Some senators have to run for re-election. Well, there's a race in Illinois, and people are paying attention to it. Why? Because you have a man named Abraham Lincoln and a man named Stephen Douglas, and they're arguing about slavery. So everybody wants to listen to what they're saying. They come out and they have crowds of 12,000 people. So Abraham Lincoln here, he's trying to be a senator and run against Stephen Douglas. And the issue is slavery. And during the debates, Lincoln says some beautiful things. And this is one of the most beautiful things that he said, because it really shows the problem that is happening in the country at that time. He says, I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. So Lincoln here is saying, look, this country, we can't survive half free and we can't survive half slave. We're either going to be all slavery or all free. And people are like, oh, wow, this is powerful stuff. There is no living together with slavery. You can't go and live with a little bit of cancer, right? You either have to have it no cancer or you die from cancer. And that's what Lincoln is articulating so well. This is his House divided speech. Okay? All right. So Lincoln and Douglas, they argue and they go back and forth. And Lincoln and Douglas puts an idea called the Freeport Doctrine. This is an important word that you should write down because it comes up all the time in the AP. During the debates, Douglas says, well, look, I think we should have a Freeport doctrine, which means that if states that don't want slavery just make laws that are against slavery, and the state doesn't have slavery. So he's saying the government doesn't have to decide. Let the states decide through the Freeport doctrine. And Lincoln says, look, this is nonsense. This is not going to work. The government has to abolish slavery, or it has to end it, right? He's starting to kind of get his thinking there. And despite these intense debates, Douglas wins the Senate. And so Abraham Lincoln actually does not become a senator. He loses the election. But, however, it made him a star. And now people had heard of Abraham Lincoln. And that's going to be important because we're about to get to the election of 1860. Guys, thumbs up. You know, the hardest part about this is that I just talk to myself. I kind of want to check in with the chat. All right. I really love that you guys are staying with me, hanging in there. I promise you guys that this is an important topic that comes up all the time in the AP. And I promise you, if you're taking the time to be here, that says you're a dedicated student that's serious about passing the AP exam. And that says a lot about you. So hang in there with me a couple more minutes and we're almost done. So we get to the election of 1860. And guess who runs here? Abraham Lincoln is nominated as the Republican nominee. Stephen Douglas, his old opponent, decides to run for president under the Democratic Party. But the Democrats are split, and they nominate another man, John Breckinridge, from the South. So the Democrats are split. And finally, you have this man named John Bell running for the Constitutional Union Party. Well, what happens here? The Democrats split the vote. What does that mean when you split the vote? Yeah, Zara, exactly. You have two people representing the party, and people are divided, so they vote for half for this person and half for this person, and really, they can't compete against a unified party. It's like, imagine if Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton were running against Trump. Basically, half the people would vote for Bernie, half the Democrats would vote for Bernie, half would vote for Hillary, and that would split the Democratic vote. Well, that's exactly what happened. And this is an excellent question, Neve. Basically, Stephen Douglas is from the North, and people from the South, they don't trust him. And so they elect their own Democrat who is kind of more aligned to their views on slavery. And so they don't trust Stephen Douglas to represent them. So they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Well, because of that, Abraham Lincoln, we're going to see Abraham Lincoln runs on a platform. He has a simple platform, the Republican Party. What do they want? They want to keep slavery out of new territories. They want to protect the tariffs for manufacturing, which is for the North. And they want to give land away in the West, which is free farmland. And the election of 1860 looks something like this. So let's look at this real quick. Abraham Lincoln is in the red. Breckinridge is in the green. In the yellow, the orange is Bell, and Douglas is in the dark green right here. So look what happens here. Who wins California? Lincoln, exactly. Arthi, and I'm going to get to that question. I'm going to table that question. I'm going to table that question because that's an excellent question. I'll come back to that in a sec. So if you look right here, Lincoln wins all of the northern states, most of the northern states here. He's not going to win some of these border states. Bell wins these. Here's Douglas, and then here is Breckinridge. And so Lincoln wins the election of 1860 with 180 electoral votes, 59% of the electoral votes, and 1,866,000 votes. And so if you look right here, here's the part that I want you to focus on right here. Between Breckinridge and Douglas, had they been united, they would have beaten Abraham Lincoln. But because they weren't united, they split the Democratic vote and they lost the election. And so Abraham Lincoln becomes the 16th president of the United States. And I want to answer that question that Arthi had. That's a great question. Let's go back. What defined the Democratic Party? Well, they were basically deciding that people should continue to decide for slavery. Stephen Douglas continued to push for the idea of popular sovereignty, and so did John Breckinridge. But he was also a strong supporter of slave codes in the territories. That means that blacks would be oppressed. So the Democrats are actually, they're not for freedom for blacks. They are basically, let's let the people decide and keep trying to do that. Hopefully that answered your question. So Abraham Lincoln becomes president. And when somebody becomes president, they get inaugurated. And Lincoln goes up to become inaugurated in 1861, and he does something. He goes up there and he says, look, guys, I know that the people that didn't vote for me, they're afraid that I'm going to end slavery. So he says, in your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the monumentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. That means we're not going to attack the South. You can have no conflict without being yourself the aggressors. You have no oath registered in heaven to destroy the government, while I should have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it. So what is Lincoln saying here? Correct. Yeah, Arthi, exactly. They wanted to continue with the issue of popular sovereignty. They didn't want to stop the spread of slavery. They wanted to kind of let the people continue to decide. So what is Lincoln saying here? This is one of his most famous quotes. All right, Arthi, good job. Zara, you're right on. That's perfect. That it's his job to protect the government. He's saying, look, I'm not going to attack you. I'm not going to take your slaves away. But if you try to break away from the country, I have to preserve, protect, and defend it. And that they have to work together. Exactly. Well, things go. Lincoln, before he's even inaugurated, in 1820, in December 20, 1861, after he's inaugurated. I'm sorry, I messed up the time. Ooh, guys, let me check real quick. I'll check back. But nevertheless, right during that time, South Carolina says, you know what? We don't want to be part of the United States anymore. Lincoln is not our president, and they secede. All right? This is a key word that you should know. They secede from the Union, and they declare that the states should have more power, that the rise of the power of the Republican Party, it's not representing them, and that the president, Lincoln, is hostile towards slavery. And so they leave. And you can see the little South Carolina here says, I'm seceding, formally withdrawing. Bye, you all. Kind of a little joke there. All right, guys, we're almost there. So after South Carolina becomes the first state to secede, more states follow. And the United States is now split. South Carolina secedes. All these states follow it, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and they all form the Confederate States of America. Then you have the states in blue. They become the free territories, and they become the Union, the United States of America. And something happens here. What happens here with Missouri, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and Delaware and Maryland? What happens here? Arthi, exactly right. So they stay in the Union, but what's unique about them, about staying in the Union? What do they have? Yeah, Kenyon, they have slaves. And so they are slave states that are deciding to stay with the United States of America because they're pro-slavery, but anti-secession. That means they do not believe that you can leave. Well, the United States, now the Union, had an army base here in Fort Sumter, and it's attacked, and this officially begins the American Civil War. And they elect the president, their own president, the Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis. He becomes the first president and the only president of the Confederate States of America. And we have the start of the Civil War in 1861. So that brings us to an end. I want to see if you guys have any questions. We got a few minutes left. Let's see if anybody wants, Jocelyn, you want to come on the stream? And I can quiz you on here. Anybody want to come on this stream for a quiz? Yeah. Yeah, Ken, go ahead. All right, Jocelyn. I'm going to call you up. You're awesome for trying, all right? So while I'm answering the question, I'm going to invite you on the screen. And then we have some questions here, all right? One sec. Sorry, guys. One sec. Sorry, guys. One sec. All right, there we go. Okay, so let me look at some of these questions. That's an excellent question right there. Why wasn't Jefferson Davis considered a U.S. president? Because essentially, Jocelyn, can you turn down your sound or put headphones on? So the reason he wasn't considered a U.S. president is because, remember, they formed their own country. So they formed their country was called the Confederate States of America. So he was not a president of the United States. He's a president of the Confederacy. So that is an excellent question. Republican Party turned into the current one, I would say right around 1960. You'll learn about what happens in 1960 during the Civil Rights Movement, where Democrats begin to support. John F. Kennedy was a Democrat. They begin to support civil rights, and the party kind of changes. All right. So real quick, I'm going to do a quick review. Jocelyn, can you hear me? Jocelyn, can you hear me? All right. Well, I'm trying to get Jocelyn up there. We have another question. That is an excellent question. So why didn't these states have electoral college votes? Let's look at this one right here. Because they were still not settled territories. They weren't states yet. And so when they couldn't necessarily vote because they weren't recognized as states. Statehood would come later on. So these were only states that were already formed. But I think had the states been, if they could have voted, I think you would have had the same outcome where Lincoln would have won. These states tended to be, most of them anti-slavery. All right, guys, I can't bring Jocelyn up here. So I'm sorry, Jocelyn. I'll try it again next time. I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight in the live stream. I hope this was helpful. I want to thank all you guys for participating. I really, really appreciate you guys. And I hope you have a great night. Thank you guys. Bye, everybody.